Greetings, I would like to share with you NOP build for Kra. This build requires XP goal level 41 or higher. First we need the Cosmic Arrows perk. Thanks to it, each use of an arrow reduces the cost of the next spell by 1 action point. Secondly, we will use the Archaeus spell. This allows us to summon an ally who uses arrows together with our hero. His arrows reduce the cost of the spell by 1, just like our hero's arrows. That means that the total cost of the spells will be reduced by 2. In addition, his summoning gives us 3 arrows, which is not bad by itself. Third, we take the repeating shooting spell. As long as we have arrows, it will return to our hand after casting. It costs 2 action points, which means that its cost will be reduced to 0 by the space arrows. So as long as our hero has arrows, we can use the spell infinitely. Also, it adds 1 action points to the reserve, so instead of consuming action points, it will actually generate them. That's great, but we need arrows to make it work, and a lot of arrows. And this is why we take Expingol as our hero. His passive ability allows us to get an arrow every time we cast a spell that costs 5 or more. By the way, this ability takes into account the original cost of the spell, so even if it is reduced below 5, we will still get our arrow. Most of our spells will cost 5 or more, so we will be using our hero's ability very efficiently. Also, we use Water Pores perk to gain more benefits from expensive spells. This will essentially lower the cost of those spells by 1 action point. To refill our arrow stock, we will use these 3 spells. Archery gives us 2 arrows for 3 action points. Ammunition Bag is an amazing spell that will give us 3 arrows for the cost of 3 action points, 5 minus 2 points to the reserve. Plus, it allows us to draw another spell from our deck. Quiver will give us 3 arrows for 5 action points, 6 minus 1 point to the reserve. It also gives us bonus to movement points, but that's of little interest to us. We also use a few air spells. You can use water or other spells if you want. It's not that crucial for our build. Sky Point, this spell gives us 2 arrows. It actually gives 3 arrows, but it uses 1. It costs 3 action points, 6 minus 1 to the reserve, minus 2 from the cost of the next spell because of Cosmic Arrows. It only generates arrows when applied to a target in the windy state. In order to have such targets, we take 3 more air spells and use the Remnant 20 use perk. This perk will apply the windy state on the target after casting any air spell. Air of View, this spell is an auxiliary spell. Sometimes it is useful to move an enemy, for example, to destroy a trap. It also allows us to draw 1 spell. It takes 1 arrow and costs 0 action points, 2 minus 2 from the cost of the next spell. Unleashed Cyclone lets us draw as many spells as many air spells we already have in our hand. We use it to refill our hand. It uses 1 arrow and generates another in return. It costs 2 action points, 5 minus 1 to the reserve and minus 2 from the next spell's cost. Last but not least, Electric Point. Similar to repeating shooting, it returns to our hand as long as we have arrows. It consumes an arrow, but generates another in return because of hero's passive ability. It costs 2 action points, 5 minus 1 to the reserve, minus 2 from the next spell's cost. Thus, while repeating shooting allows us to utilize arrows and generates action points, Electric Points does not consume arrows, but allows us to utilize excess action points. We discussed our spells, now let's talk about perks. We use air and water perks to be able to use Cosmic Arrow, and as was mentioned before, we must use Water Pose and Remnant when to use. Now, what other perks will be useful? The Water Sharpening perk allows our hero to heal himself if he has at least 2 arrows left at the end of the turn. The Concentrated Trickery perk gives a chance to increase action points reserve by one once per turn when we cast a spell on a distant target. Not the most useful perks for our build. We use them mostly just to spend 40 points in the School of Water. Air perks are more useful. Air Sharpening allows us to draw an extra spell if we have at least 2 arrows left in the end of a turn. The Thoughtful Trickery perk allows us to significantly increase the magic damage. It triggers every time we draw a spell. When a spell comes back into our hand, it triggers too, so it's a very useful perk for our build. And of course, if possible, we should upgrade a Space Arrow perk, since arrows will deal the most of our damage. You can also use Burning Sharpening. It will deal damage to all enemies around your hero every time you use an arrow. If there are problems with your hero's survivability, you can use Clay Sharpening. Also, you can drop 1 point to Cautious Trickery. Now let's take a look at rings. To be honest, I don't have a lot of rare and legendary rings yet, so maybe there are better options. The Valuant ring is very useful. It gives 2 action points to the reserve at the start of the battle, and reduces the cost of the next spell by 1 on the first use of the reserve once per turn. And this gives us 3 extra action points on the first turn, which is very useful for our build, since sometimes we will be able to summon Arceus on the first turn. In addition, each time we use the reserve, it gives 1 action point to the reserve with a 20% chance. Since we will be using reserve very actively, this gives a very nice bonus to our action points. Also, to increase the survivability of my hero, I use a ring that gives armor to the hero each time I use a reserve, and a ring which heals the hero each time I get an arrow. There is also a ring that gives a bonus to the magic damage. I took allies from the air element, but you can take a couple from other elements as well, since we have a lot of neutral spells. Now let's discuss our tactics. It's important to summon Arceus as soon as possible. After that, we spam repeated shooting and refill our arrows stock using the rest of the spells. Excess action points are utilized by Electric Points spell. Now let's see how it works in the real battle.
Qui vient interrompre mon oraison funèbre?
Je ne vous avais rien demandé. Je devrais faire preuve de plus de respect.